Hi, folks. I'm Father Joe Grimaldi. You can call me Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. But now, here's our host and friend, Ken Calvert.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Father Joe Grimaldi podcast. I'm Ken Calvert, alongside my very good friend, Father Joe Grimaldi. The Father Joe Grimaldi podcast is being supported by our great friends at Hoot McInerney Starlink and 12 Mile and Telegraph in Southfield. The family, along with the entire staff, once again want to thank you. They've been serving our community for over 50 years with another 50 to come. That's why so many of their customers come back, second time, third time. Guys like me on their fourth Starlink and SUV. Star would like to thank you for one of their best months ever. And it's easy because they've got a great lineup of sedans and SUVs, and you have to stop by, say hi, have a cup of coffee, and take a look at that 2020 Lincoln Aviator. If you're not blown away, friends, I can't help you. Star Lincoln 12 Mile and Telegraph. You can shop online at starlincoln.com. Highly recommend you do that. Hoot McInerney Star Lincoln, 12 Mile Road and Telegraph in Southfield, the home of the Father Joe Grimaldi Star Treatment. Well, did you have a good 4th of July, my friend?
Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm
with all the trimmings.
I'm wearing my spandex Bermudas today. Allowing myself to breathe a little bit. Did a little overeating on the 4th of July, as one tends to do. You know why I think it is?
Why?
Well, in my case, it was because we got a late start. Sit around, get to talk and whatnot, and when it's just burgers and brats, they can wait. You know what I mean?
That's right.
They can wait because everybody else brings the cold salads and all
Sure.
that. So you get around chirping, doing what you do best, playing some jarts, and a little croquet, little volleyball.
Yeah.
Kidding about the jarts. Do you remember that game as a kid?
No.
That was we had that as a kid. It was it looked like a dart, but they called it a jart. And it was probably the most dangerous toy Wham-O or whoever the toy company was made. It was a giant dart that you would throw at this little, looked like a baby hula hoop.
Okay.
And you would try and land this dart in the middle of the little hula hoop.
But it didn't have a pointed end.
It did have a pointed end.
Did it?
And a lot of kids ended up going to the emergency room. And eventually we figured out that was not a good game for the kids to play. We went with the Nerf Jart.
Yes,
the one where nobody gets hurt. Nobody gets hurt. Well, so it's a holiday weekend. A lot of people are out of town. Locally here, the churches are a little thinner. Up north, of course, like we said anyway, they're a little fuller because of the fact that so many people, especially now, are taking their summer vacations. They're probably going to a church that's relatively new to them in some cases.
Sure.
And other people just only see it a couple of times a year.
Mm-hmm.
I got to thinking about when we were talking about St. Thomas the Apostle the other day, and I looked up St. Thomas as a parish, and there's a lot of parishes named St. Thomas.
Uh-huh.
So as I tend to want to do, I got to thinking about that, and I was thinking about the fact that I started my Catholic education at St. Suzanne in Detroit, St. Bede in Southfield. Then, of course, I went to, and I've been to Holy Name, St. Regis, St. Hugo. Been to all the churches, basically all around, not all of them, but many of them all around southeast lower Michigan. How does a church come up with its name? How does somebody get the name St. Bede? How did St. Suzanne get her name?
Well, I think, Ken, most dioceses or archdioceses, there would be a committee to talk over the establishment of a new parish, and the parish dedication is going to be coming up soon, and we need to have a name, or very often the name has already been chosen because they're trying to raise some funds to finish building it. So there would be people discussing the possibilities. One of the things they might look at is how many other churches have the same name. You don't want to keep duplicating. The other thing is this, that there are certain requirements in the church. Well, for example, you could name a church in honor of the Trinity. You could name a church in honor of Christ. For example, right in our neighborhood, we have a church called Christ Our Light, which sometimes gets people confused. Well, that's the name of a church. and it refers to Christ. But it could be the name of any canonized saint or any blessed even, as long as the individual has been officially blessed. For example, in our diocese, we could have a name of Blessed Solanus, or Blessed Edmund Rice, and so on and so forth. So there are names that can be used of people who are blessed. One of the things that confuses people, because I hear this a lot, how long do we have to wait for Solanus to be a saint?
Yes.
This type of thing. That's something I always get.
Yeah.
I know this is an aside from what we were talking.
No, I was going to ask you that.
I'm somewhat, once someone is considered or has been named blessed, he may as well be a saint. He's got all the qualifications, if you want. John Paul II is noted as the Pope who beatified so many people, countless numbers of people, because he felt that everybody should have an idol, and I use the word idol loosely, someone that they could imitate, so someone they could relate to. So, for example, you would want a saint who's involved in music. You would want a saint who's involved with painting. You have a saint who's a carpenter, lots of those. You have Christ himself, and so on. Even couples, married couples, canonizing them or beatifying them. So what happened was he beatified so many people that after he died, these people are still beatified, they're still blessed. Does that mean that they're not holy, they're not saints? No, I think they are saints. I think they are part of the heavenly court. So you're allowed to use the name of a blessed. I don't feel sorry for Solanus because he is blessed. He is a saint. Don't worry about it. He doesn't have that special title that people want to see, and eventually he will get it probably, and maybe not. There are people that never get it.
So in other words, I could easily be going through the front doors of Blessed Solanus Church.
Yeah.
If he's eventually, I don't want to say, well, I guess I will, elevated to saint, will the church change its name to...
yeah, they'll just change the title.
They will call it Saint
Yeah,
Solanus.
sure.
Okay, all right. I don't know if I interrupted you or not, but I was curious about that. You answered that question.
No, you did not interrupt me at all. Yeah. It's just that mine was an aside, really, because we were talking about naming churches. I don't know if it's as complicated as people think. It has to do with a committee, if you want. It has to do with input by other groups within the church that are recommending a particular name. And that's the one that they will eventually come to focus on, and that's the one then that will become the name of that church. The church dedication is very, very important. In the dedication of the church, when the bishop comes, he uses the holy oils of chrism, the ones that are used for ordination of priests, the ones that are used for top of the altar with the oil of chrism, even the walls of the church. Usually they would spread the oil of chrism on that too. And chrism is used at confirmation, it's used at ordinations, and it is also used when we dedicate a church. Now, another thing that's interesting, usually the relics, if they're available, and most likely they can get relics, are put underneath the altar so that the relics of that particular saint are put underneath the altar. You don't hear of that too much today. However, if you look at any church that was dedicated before today, I'm sure they have the relics of the church somewhere underneath the altar itself.
Getting back to the naming portion of it, the new status, okay? We have this area, we have this growth, and now I'm probably deflecting back to the 50s and the 60s and maybe a little bit in the early 70s. You had that growth, you had that spurt, you had that area. We need our own church here. We used to start rather Spartan-like. It would just be, I don't even know if it was designated a temporary church, but you sort of had an idea that here's the church, here's the school, Eventually, we have the property to build a bigger church.
Mm-hmm.
And down the road, we hope to be able to do that. But if we can't, this church is our church, and it's just fine. And then you get together with, I would assume, architects, and you put together everything you would to build your home, okay? And then whose input gets to go into the actual facade, the look of the church? Are the parishioners invited to participate in that?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Not only the parishioners, but they work along with a liturgical committee, someone who's involved in liturgical art, so that the church will be correctly put together. I'm talking about things like the baptismal font, where should it go, how should it be. They would have, a space for the choir, where is that going to be, and so on. So usually you have the input of the parish or the parishioners, but also the input of the liturgical committee for the archdiocese or the diocese.
Who comes first, the church or the priest, the pastor, or both at the same time? Is a pastor assigned to a church while it's being built?
Well, if it's towards the end of it's being built, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a heavy lift then for a lot of parishioners who are sort of designing a church for a priest that they don't even know yet.
Well, this may be another tangent, but I want to
fine.
say this much. No matter how beautiful or how ugly a church is, architecturally,
Yeah,
the people are the church.
right. People forget that,
Yeah.
but people forget that.
It's the
People want
the people,
people.
are the church.
Yeah, I know, but people like beauty. They like having oohs and ahs as you
very
walk through the
many-
front doors.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's so many beautiful churches in Detroit that are not being used.
Yeah.
Because you do have the architectural standouts, in my mind, that are just spectacular in so many of the churches of downtown Detroit.
Can't be recreated.
So,
Can't be
no,
done. No.
No. Financially,
Financially, it could not be done. That's those type of craftspeople are no longer around.
And the other thing, too, not everybody likes that anymore, too. So I think, unfortunately, very often people are into this box look or, this type of thing.
I find it interesting. So there are so many parishes, and there is duplicity, obviously, if not triplicity and quadricity or whatever it might be, whatever the expression is. Several churches have St. Anne, St. Mary, St. Thomas, the obvious ones. But then there are subsets of that as well, like you said. Churches like Christ Our Light.
Yes.
There actually is protocol for this, and I found it interesting in that when you look it up, and it says that the guideline regarding the naming of a Catholic church is found in the liturgical book called The Rite of Dedication of a Church and an Altar. That goes back to 1989, not that far. And it's administered in conjunction with Catholic Canon Laws 1217 and 1218. Chosen name of the church must be the name of the Trinity, or a name for Christ, the name of the Holy Spirit, or a name for Mary, the name of a holy angel, or the name of a canonized saint as it appears in the Roman Martyrology, or the name of a blessed provided by the Apostolic See.
Yes.
There's actual criteria for it.
That is the criteria that you just named, okay? It has to be one of those. It can't be somebody down the street that you want to honor with the name. No, it has to be a saint, Christ. It has to be Mary. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do understand what you're saying. I find it fascinating, though, because people are so loyal to their church.
Yeah.
There really is. I love that. I think that competitive spirit, that's a good thing to have as well. I mean, it can even be as simple as grade school, high school sports.
Also, I think each diocese has a special saint that becomes their saint, like St. Anne in Detroit.
Sure, yeah.
That's the patroness of the archdiocese.
So much history about that church. If you're from the Detroit area or around or outside of Detroit, look that church up. One of the oldest.
Yeah.
One of the oldest you will ever find. And if you ever travel into Detroit, make it a stop.
Sure.
Along with the Motown Museum, Henry Ford, and so many other areas that you should see when you come to Detroit. And downtown as well. I'm just doing my civic duty for our city here in Detroit.
You have to.
Now, there has to be some interesting stories about some parishes out there and how they managed to get their name.
Of course there are. There has to be.
Okay.
Because we're human.
Isn't that make it interesting, too?
It makes it very interesting.
I saved it to the very end, of course. But now I'm going to let you tell us a little story, if you'd like, and how far into that story you want to go.
Well, the thing is this. There's always rumors about why a church was named in a special way.
Yeah.
And very often we can be jaded and say, well, a lot of it has to do with the amount of money that was donated for the building of that church, and therefore some preference was given to the donor's wishes. And I think that happens at times. There's no question. The donor can very easily request that, okay, if I give this much money, do you think you would consider... However, it doesn't take away the fact that the name has to be one of those in the criteria given in canon law. It has to be in honor of Christ, of Mary, of one of the holy angels. It has to be one of the canonized saints, one of the blessed.
We've been through the list, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it has to be.
And I want you to know that there's a very animated Father Joe Grimaldi sitting across from me right now, appearing to almost conduct the orchestra, pointing at me, going, now remember. So continue with your story. So let's just say somebody had great faith in the Catholic Church. There was a need for a new church. That person happened to have some money that was appropriated for helping out the Catholic Church. Perhaps we could name the church after that person.
Well, it's not beyond
consideration
to know that there's a priest who's in charge of the committee for the building of the church that's going to be 3 miles away from where he is now, and his mother's name is Agnes.
Okay.
So why not name the church after St. Agnes?
Can
I present that as, and so you present it to the committee looks at it, how many churches do we have with that name, maybe we can use it, and so on.
Do you think sometimes the parish gets together and go, oh, I see what you're doing here, I'd rather you didn't do it that way? So many opinions, I guess I'm just rocked by the world we live in today. Everybody seems to want to this or that, everything.
Everybody has an opinion, there's no question.
Right.
But I think this is why you have committees that is designated to do the work. Hopefully they have the wisdom to make sure to filter all of the opinions that come from the various groups so that they could come up with a reasonable, honest, worthy type of name for the church.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I have I don't know why, all of a sudden, I thought I heard this. Maybe I dreamt it, maybe I just thought it up, but here it goes, okay?
Sure.
Do churches have to be facing a certain direction?
There is a certain architecture, and it's called the Basilica. The Basilica is not only an honorary name, but it's also the way a basilica is structured. I believe, I may be wrong, that the basilica has to face a certain way. It has to have a certain interior design that fits that of a basilica. But yet, I don't know how strongly we have to adhere to that. For example, we name basilicas for honorary purposes. Like here in Detroit, we just had a name for a minor basilica, and that is
Shrine of the Little Flower?
Shrine of the Little Flower. So whether it is in the architectural mode of a basilica, I don't know. But, it was named for honorary reasons. In Honolulu, we have a cathedral that's named for honorary reasons, Our Lady of Peace Cathedral. That's a basilica, so it takes on the name of a basilica. Basilica is an honorary term, but it also is an architectural term. And I'm afraid I'm not too versed in that.
Well, good. That means that the class has an assignment.
We have to look up basilica.
Yeah, listen, we would like to provide all of the answers all of the time. And we could stop the podcast right here, right now, and go back and say, oh, yes, but we've decided to no. We leave it in its virgin territory here, where it is right now. And immediately after the podcast, we'll
look it up.
We are going to look it up. Final question then about a basilica. So a church can go from a church to a basilica, or is it built as a basilica?
Okay, now you bring up some. In ancient times, whatever those are, there was such a thing as building a basilica. However, when we speak about the honorary terminology, that can be given to any church.
At any time?
At any time.
Okay.
For example, if the church has such importance for a diocese or an archdiocese, there may be enough push to get that to become a basilica. And so that's when you have this writing between Rome and the diocese and the archdiocese.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
I learn something new virtually every 15 minutes.
Well, me too.
When you enjoy the Father Joe podcast. And so there you have the story of how, now, folks, it's your job to go back and ask your pastor or some of your fellow parishioners if you don't already know the story of your name, of your church, if you don't know how it came about. Simply go to the pastor and say, "Pardon me, Father, how did we get the name St. Leo?" And that'll be your assignment for next week, folks.
Good question.
Yeah, but we certainly know who St. Leo is. We'll do that on another podcast. In the meantime, I'm Ken Calvert. I want to thank you for joining us on the Father Joe Grimaldi podcast. We'll see you next time.
I look forward to it. This is Father Joe Grimaldi, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe podcast.
If you'd like, you can email us. It's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. That's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. Simply search Father Joe Grimaldi. And thanks for listening, everyone.